I've been a nurse for over a decade now, and I can say with certainty that I've seen more than most people would ever want to. The emergencies, the codes, the heartbreak, those I expected when I chose this job. What I didn't expect was how often the scariest part of the job isn't just the patients coming through the doors, but the people you work beside. There was one night in particular that I'll never forget. And if I'm honest, I'm still not sure whether telling the story makes me look like a hero or just someone who was lucky things didn't go much worse. Either way, this is what happened. I was working a night shift in the ER. It was a Friday, the kind of night where people drink too much, fight too much, and then end up in our beds. The waiting room was overflowing, ambulances lined up outside, and every single nurse was stretched thin. We were running on caffeine, adrenaline, and habit. The attending physician that night was someone I'll call Dr. H. He'd been with the hospital a long time, and he had a reputation, good with patients, fast on his feet, but also cocky. He had a temper, and he definitely didn't like being told he was wrong. I'd never seen him sloppy, though, at least not at work. From the moment I saw him, I noticed something off. His eyes were glassy, his speech a little too relaxed, and when he leaned close to look at a chart, I caught the smell. Whiskey. Strong. Now, I've worked with plenty of tired doctors who come in looking like they haven't slept in days. That's one thing. But this wasn't exhaustion. This was something else. I remember my stomach dropping as I thought, he's drunk. The ER was packed, so there wasn't time to sit around questioning it. My first patient of the night was a teenage girl who'd been in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but she had a nasty gash on her forehead and possible concussion. While I was assessing her, Dr. H wandered in, chart in his hand, swaying just slightly. He started asking her bizarre questions, stuff that didn't even make sense for the situation. I tried to steer him back, but he brushed me off. Eventually, he told the parents she was fine and tried to discharge her without ordering a scan. I stepped in, saying, "Doctor, she's been vomiting since she arrived. Protocol says we need to scan." He glared at me, muttered something under his breath, and then walked out of the room. The parents looked at me, confused and worried. I whispered to them, "Don't worry. I'll make sure she gets what she needs." And I did. I spoke to the charge nurse, got the scan ordered under another provider, and sure enough, small brain bleed. She went straight to neurosurgery. That was the first close call. I wish I could say it ended there. Around midnight, EMS brought in a middle-aged man who was in bad shape. Collapsed at home, chest pain, barely responsive. Classic cardiac case. We rushed him into a bay, monitors beeping like crazy, blood pressure in the floor, heart rate unstable. I started 4 lines, hung fluids, slapped on oxygen, called for meds. Everything was moving fast, like it always does. Then Dr. H stumbled in. He was supposed to be leading the code. Instead, he was fumbling with the chart, dropping his pen, slurring his words. He ordered a medication dose that was 4 times higher than protocol. I froze. I knew that if I pushed that med, the patient could crash instantly. I said, "Doctor, are you sure about that dose?" He snapped at me. "Do what I said." His voice was loud enough that everyone in the room went quiet. The other nurses looked at me, wide-eyed. In that moment, I made a choice. I pretended to prepare the med, but I didn't give it. Instead, I pulled the resident aside and whispered what was happening. The resident's face went pale. Within seconds, he stepped in, took over the code, and corrected the orders. We stabilized the patient. He made it to the cath lab and survived. But if I had done what Dr. H told me, he probably wouldn't have. That should have been enough to get him pulled from the floor immediately. But medicine is complicated. Politics, hierarchy, fear of lawsuits. People look the other way more than you'd think. That night, though, I wasn't about to let it slide. When the adrenaline settled, I went straight to the charge nurse. She already suspected something was off with him. She'd seen him stumble into a supply cart earlier. Together, we called the nursing supervisor. By then it was almost 2 a.m., and word had spread quietly through the unit. Everyone knew. The supervisor came down, had a talk with him in a back office, and less than 10 minutes later, Dr. H was gone, escorted out. His shift was over, and someone else was called in. The rest of the night was still chaos, but at least we could breathe again, knowing no more patients would be put at risk. The next morning, when my shift ended, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. My hands were still shaking. I kept thinking about how close we'd come to losing that patient, how close that teenage girl had been to being sent home with a brain bleed. And all because a doctor showed up drunk. You know, people always assume doctors are these flawless, perfect figures in hospitals, and nurses are just the helpers. But the truth is, nurses are often the last line of defense. We're the ones standing in the room, catching mistakes before they kill someone, noticing the small things others miss. That night changed the way I saw my job. I realized that sometimes saving a life doesn't just mean starting compressions or hanging the right bag of fluids. Sometimes it means having the guts to step in when the person in charge is wrong, no matter who they are. Now, I wish I could tell you, Doctor. H lost his license that night, but that's not how it went. There was an investigation. He was suspended for a while, went to rehab, and eventually came back. Officially, the hospital never admitted what happened. But word gets around. Nurses talk. Everyone knew. For me, though, the lesson stuck. I swore to myself that if I ever saw anything like that again, I wouldn't hesitate. Patients trust us with their lives, and we don't get to look away. Now, I wish I could tell you, Doctor. H lost his license that night, but that's not how it went. There was an investigation. He was suspended for a while, went to rehab, and eventually came back. Officially, the hospital never admitted what happened. But word gets around. Nurses talk. Everyone knew. For me, though, the lesson stuck. I swore to myself that if I ever saw anything like that again, I wouldn't hesitate. Patients trust us with their lives, and we don't get to look away. So yeah, people sometimes call nurses heroes. I don't know if I'd go that far. But I do know this. If I hadn't trusted my gut that night, if I had followed orders blindly, at least 2 families would have gotten phone calls they never should have had to get. And that's the night I realized that sometimes the scariest part of nursing isn't what comes through the ER doors. Sometimes it's who's standing beside you on the other side of the bed.